Diplomat's Archives. Hidden Stories. This is the 51st story.
The enemy attacked savagely under the clangor of bugles and trumpets. The forward elements were completely surrounded, going through the first day and into the second. Again and again, the enemy threw waves of troops at the gallant defenders, but each time, the courageous, indomitable, and determined soldiers repulsed the fanatical attacks.
On April 24, 2026, in Gapyeong, Gyeonggido Province, a commemorative ceremony was held to honor the sacrifice and dedication of Canadian veterans who fought in the Battle of Kapyong. Fought during the Korean War in 1951, the Battle of Kapyong marks its 75th anniversary this year. As we mark this anniversary, today we uncover the hidden stories of the battle and the Canadian soldiers who fought here. On June 25, 1950, the Korean War broke out with North Korea's invasion of South Korea.
4 days and nights, nobody slept.
On June 27th, the United Nations Security Council adopted a resolution calling on member nations to provide military assistance to South Korea. And Canada was among the countries that deployed troops to South Korea at the time. But what led Canada to decide to send troops to support South Korea?
My name is Philippe Lafortune. I'm the current Canadian ambassador to the Republic of Korea. I think we need to put this question into context and where we are in 1950 at that point. This is right after a couple of years after the Second World War. And at that point, the Canadian military, their weight across the world is actually far greater than it is now in 2026. Canada is probably among the top 5 biggest military in the world right now in 1950. And Canadian, it was true then, and it's true now, always felt the call of duty to help and support countries, population that are like-minded, that share the same values. And that was the case in the 1950s. And so they joined the like-minded. They became the 3rd biggest troop-contributing country, sending state country to participate in the Korean War. Over 561 of them actually made the greatest sacrifice here during the Korean War and the Korean War itself.
During the Korean War, Canada deployed a total of 26,791 troops to Korea. This was the 3rd largest contribution following the United States and the United Kingdom. Canada was also one of only 4 countries to deploy forces from all 3 branches, the Army, Navy, and Air Force. To learn more about the involvement of Canadian soldiers during the Korean War, our team met with an expert.
합동군사대학교에서 교리연구를 담당하고 있는 육군 중령 홍민혁입니다. 가평전투 이전에는 해군하고 공군부대 위주로 작전을 했습니다. 그래서 가장 대표적인 것은 호크 작전이라고 해서 미국 서부에 있는 맥코드 기지와 일본의 하네다 기지를 왕복하면서 장비와 물자를 수송했던 것이 호크 작전입니다. 그리고 구축함들을 보내서 해군 작전을 했었고, 캐나다군이 해군과 공군을 보냈던 그 7월 상황은 한국군과 유엔군이 낙동강산까지 계속 밀려나가는 굉장히 위험한 상황이었습니다. 그런 상황에서 캐나다군이 참전을 한다, 또는 영연방 국가들도 6.25 전쟁에 참전한다라는 소식이 들렸다는 것은 사기에 도움이 되지 않았을까 하는 그런 판단이 됩니다.
In July 1950, Canadian naval and air forces arrived in Korea. Then, in December 1950, Canadian Army troops entered Korea for the first time.
And when it comes to infantry, we have 3 regiments. And so we have the 22e Régiment, that would be the 22nd Regiment in English. That's the regiment mostly made of French Canadian, my own province itself. And then we have the RCR, the Royal Canadian Regiment. And then you have the PPCLI, the Patricia Canadian Light Infantry. It's a very, very famous, obviously, regiment as self. And PPCLI made a major contribution during the Korean War itself.
After arriving in Korea, Canadian soldiers fought in multiple battles throughout the Korean War in support of South Korea. And one of the most notable battles in which Canadian forces played a key role was the Battle of Kapyong. As the ambassador mentioned earlier, the 2nd Battalion of the Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry, together with British, Australian, and New Zealand forces, took part in the battle as part of the 27th British Commonwealth Brigade. Gapyeong is located about an hour and a half by car from Seoul. 75 years ago, a fierce battle took place here, in what now appears to be a place of peace.
가평 전투 이전에 전황은 어디가 주도권을 잡느냐, 지금 그 유엔군이냐 중공군이냐 그런 상황이었습니다. 그래서 중공군이 5차 공세를 준비하고 있었던 것도 알고 있었고, 그런 상황에서 굉장히 일촉즉발의 상황이라고 해야 될 것 같습니다. 그런 상황이었는데 중공군은 빨리 공격을 해서 전쟁의 주도권을 가져가고 싶어 하는 겁니다. 이미 서울을 한번 점령을 했었다가 다시 뒤로 물러난 상황인데, 그 상황을 다시 역전을 시켜서 전세를 가져와야 유리한 상황이 되는 거기 때문에 중공군 입장에서도 빨리 공격을 하고 싶어 하는 상황이고, 유엔군 입장에서도 우리가 다시 한번 서울을 탈환을 했다가 지금 대치하고 있는 상황인데 저들의 공격을 막지 못하면 전세가 뒤집어지는 걸 알고 있기 때문에 양측이 굉장히 신경전이 벌어지고 있었던 상황이라고 봐야 될 것 같습니다.
In the early stages of the Korean War, North Korean forces rapidly advanced south, capturing Seoul and pushing South Korean and UN forces back to the Nakdonggang River line. Following the success of the Incheon landing operation, South Korean and UN forces recaptured Seoul and began advancing north, turning the tide of the war. However, in October 1950, the Chinese forces entered the Korean War, intensifying the conflict once again. Then, in early 1951, following the fourth offensive by North Korean and Chinese forces, the front line began to stagnate near the 38th parallel. From this point, the war shifted from a war of movement to a war of attrition, with intense defensive battles taking place along the front. However, on April 22, 1951, North Korean and Chinese forces launched a large-scale offensive known as the Fifth Offensive, involving hundreds of thousands of troops. Their objective was to capture Seoul and defeat South Korean and UN forces. During this phase, many South Korean and UN units came under heavy pressure, and the front line began to break down. Amid this situation, one of the areas where Chinese forces concentrated their offensive was Gapyeong.
네, 가평 지역은 화천, 춘천, 가평을 거쳐서 서울로 들어가는 그 길목이기도 하고, 그 유엔군이 좌우측으로 나눠서 동서로 나눠서 이렇게 그 방어를 하고 있었습니다. 좌측은 주로 미군이 담당이었고 우측은 주로 한국군이 담당이었는데, 그 좌우측을 이렇게 방어하고 있는 그 부대가 만나는 지역입니다. 그러니까 거기가 전투지경선이라고 해서 이 두 부대들이 이렇게 연결되어 있는 그런 지역이 되겠습니다. 그러다 보니까 여기가 뚫리게 되면 좌측에 있는 부대와 우측에 있는 부대 간에 연결이 안 되는 상황이 발생을 할 수도 있습니다. 그래서 중국군 구병단은 아마 그런 것을 노리고 공격을 했을 거라고 보이고.
In this situation, the 27th British Commonwealth Brigade was deployed to the Kapyong area. At the time, the brigade consisted of Canadian, British, and Australian forces, as well as New Zealand artillery units. On April 23, 1951, Chinese forces attempted to advance toward Gapyeong, marking the beginning of the Battle of Kapyong. Gapyeong, a strategic gateway on the approach to Seoul, was a critical point that enemy forces had to break through and a defensive line that Commonwealth forces were determined to hold. However, defending this area was far from easy. At the time, around 10,000 enemy troops took part in the Battle of Kapyong, while the Commonwealth forces numbered only about 2,000. The Canadian forces also had to face enemy troops that far outnumbered them.
And when we look at Kapyong battles, that was about 700 members of PPCLI that at one point needed to stop an offensive operation by the Chinese military, where over 5,000 Chinese military were marching towards Seoul, and there was a dramatic requirement to stop those troops to advance and take over Seoul itself. And the burden of doing that fall into the PPCLI's member. And so with 700 members, they were able to not only engage those 5,000 Chinese soldiers, but block their progression toward Seoul itself.
During the Battle of Kapyong, an Australian battalion was positioned on Hill 504 on the right, while a Canadian battalion was positioned on Hill 677 on the left. Enemy forces first launched an attack on the Australian positions at Hill 504. Despite being heavily outnumbered, the Australian troops held the hill for over 24 hours, successfully halting the enemy's advance. As the Australian battalion carried out a tactical withdrawal to the rear for the treatment of the wounded and resupply, the focus of the battle shifted to Hill 677, held by Canadian forces. From around 10 p.m. on the 24th, Canadian forces were subjected to heavy concentrated attacks by the enemy troops. Even so, they fought continuously through the night and into the early morning, doing everything they could to hold their ground. In certain sectors, enemy forces closed in to just a few meters, resulting in intense close-quarters combat as the battle grew increasingly fierce. Amid this situation, the Canadian forces also made decisions that placed themselves at significant risk.
They made some of the most incredible and difficult military decisions that they can be for a commander. And more specifically, because they were about to be overrun by those Chinese military, they made the absolutely brave request that they receive and be targeted by the Allied artillery itself. And so you heard me correctly. Those Canadian soldiers asked the Allies to bomb their position because they knew they were about to be overrun. And so that very, very brave military action blocked the Chinese advancement and was decisive in their ability to the PPCLI to block, again, during the Kapyong battle itself.
The Chinese soldiers advanced in rows of 30 to 50 soldiers, intent on overrunning D Company, and after 2.5 hours of intense fighting, the Chinese had the Patricia surrounded. With the situation growing desperate, the enemy were within 7 meters of 10 platoon. Lieutenant Mike Levy, cool under intense enemy fire, called in an artillery and mortar barrage on the Patricia's 10 platoon front a danger close fire order. This 40-minute-long strike, involving 24 New Zealand and 57 American guns, saw some 4,500 shells crash down on the Patricias and their attackers. The noise was deafening, the barrage murderous, the fires and smoke confused the battlefield.
어떻게 보면 이 가평 전투가 중공군이 계속 공격을 해오는 그런 그 모멘텀, 기세를 꺾었다고 볼 수가 있습니다. 그래서 한번 여기서 가평에서 막지를 못했으면 아마 서울도 물론이고 남쪽으로 계속 밀려 내려왔을 수도 있는데 가평에서 이 부대들이 잘 싸워줬기 때문에 공격의 모멘텀이 한번 꺾였다고 볼 수가 있는 겁니다. 그런 면에서 중요한 전투라고 볼 수가 있습니다.
In this way, the 27th Commonwealth Brigade, including Canadian forces, despite being heavily outnumbered, held its defensive line to the very end and successfully halted the advance of enemy forces. With this victory, Seoul was successfully defended, and South Korean and UN forces were able to secure a safe route for withdrawal. Having failed to achieve their objective, the North Korean and Chinese forces brought the first phase of the Fifth Offensive to an end after just 7 days. However, despite the historic victory, 10 Canadian soldiers were killed and 23 were wounded in the battle. The Battle of Kapyong is regarded as one of the greatest achievements of the Commonwealth forces, with significant contributions from Canadian troops during the Korean War. In recognition of these achievements, the 2nd Battalion, Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry, along with the 3rd Battalion, Royal Australian Regiment, and A Company of the U.S. 72nd Heavy Tank Battalion were awarded the U.S. Presidential Unit Citation by President Truman.
Canada is a country that not often celebrate its military achievement. This is simply not in our nature itself. We're a very peaceful nation, but PPCLI contribution to the Gapyeong is probably one of the greatest military achievement of the Canadian Armed Forces throughout its history itself. And that is something that is celebrated in Canada on a regular basis. And I would say that Kapyong battle is definitely in the very fabric of the PPCLI itself, very fabric of the Canadian Armed Forces, and it showed the professionalism, the dedication, and the bravery of the members of the Canadian Armed Forces itself. And it's again a good example that we can build upon. And so what it means for the Kapyong battle for the Canadian Armed Forces, it means that we can do it. It means that we're strong, and it means that it's worthwhile to make the greatest sacrifice for like-minded countries.
In Gapyeong, a monument stands in honor of the Canadian forces who fought in the Korean War. And on April 24, 2026, a commemorative ceremony honoring the Canadian Forces' participation in the Battle of Kapyong was held here. A special guest who traveled all the way from Canada also attended the ceremony. His name is Ronald John Foyle. About 73 years ago, he served in the Korean War as a member of the Royal Canadian Navy. Our team spoke with him and asked how he felt about returning to Korea.
It's just a wonderful, it's remarkable. I mean, it's outstanding coming back here. I'm so honored and privileged, and it's difficult to put into words. Sometimes you get a little emotional about it because it's so important, you know. And I didn't realize how important it might be when I was 17, 18 years old when I came over here, and didn't realize then later on in life how much it would mean, and coming back here and being honored by the people of Korea. It's just an outstanding experience. That's very difficult, very difficult to explain. And how much has it changed? To see what Korea has become now, I mean, it's just outstanding. There's a great camaraderie between Korea and Canada, always has been. Canada and Korea have a bond, and I'd really like to see that continue.
On the 75th anniversary of the Battle of Kapyong, other notable visitors also came to this place. They are active duty soldiers from the Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry. On this occasion, they visited this site where the battle took place, traveling all the way from Canada to pay tribute.
The Battle of Kapyong is deeply ingrained into the fabric of our battalion. It is part of who we are. It's something we teach about our soldiers. We remember those who fell here. It is the birthplace of our battalion, if you will.
So the Battle of Kapyong for us is really the defining moment of our battalion. It's where we won this presidential unit citation, the blue pool on my shoulders. For us, it really cemented the legacy of our soldiers as hard working and effective allies within the United Nations command.
It feels incredible, just the honor that it is to be here, the privilege that we have getting to be here, chosen out of so many soldiers to represent our country, and to feel the history here is just unbelievable.
With all of them gathered together, the commemorative ceremony began.
We stand here with deep gratitude and respect, mindful that the freedom we enjoy today were secured through the devotion and bravery of others. As we remember the past, let us also recommit ourselves to peace, to partnership, and to never forgetting the sacrifices made here. Canada will always remember Gapyeong. Canada will always remember Korea. Lest we forget, n'oublions jamais.
Many people have gathered here to remember the Canadian soldiers who fought in the Battle of Kapyong. Their shared remembrance ensures that the Battle of Kapyong and the sacrifices of Canadian forces will be remembered for years to come. Although the ceremony had ended, the PPCLI soldiers did not leave Kapyong. Their next destination was the site where Canadian forces fought during the battle. About 15 minutes from the Canadian monument, a forest trail has been established at the site of the Battle of Kapyong, where Canadian forces fought. The trail stretches for about 1.6 kilometers around Hill 677, which Canadian forces defended 75 years ago. Our team also followed them toward the forest trail at the battle site. However, in the mountains, it was not easy to keep up with the pace of trained soldiers. In the end, we lost sight of them, but decided to continue following the trail to the end. The terrain was rougher and steeper than expected. It was hard to believe that such intense battles like the Battle of Kapyong had taken place in a place like this.
It would be a great place to defend, an impossible place to attack. The terrain is so steep. It's hard for me to fathom exactly how this battle would have taken place, with the terrain being so steep and so inhospitable.
It's surreal what those soldiers went through just to get on the hill and then to repel the waves of Chinese attackers. We went up without any gear, no weapons, no equipment, and we had a tough time getting up that hill. I think it's a pretty powerful moment for our soldiers to realize what our forebears did and the legacy that they have now to carry on.
After a long climb along the mountain trail, we finally reached the end point. It is the highest point among the areas where Canadian forces fought and one of the sites where the fiercest battles took place. Here, we came across a pavilion known as Canada House. This was also built to honor the Canadian forces who took part in the Battle of Kapyong. From the end point, looking down below, we reflected on the Canadian troops who fought fierce battles here 75 years ago. The battlefield we had only imagined in our minds was completely different from what we saw with our own eyes. Standing here and taking in the sight firsthand made the actions of the soldiers who fought in the Korean War feel even more meaningful. Our team asked the soldiers who joined us here what they would like to say to the veterans who fought here 75 years ago.
I have profound respect for you. I can't really put it into words, the level of respect I have for you to have fought here in this terrain. Their efforts, their sacrifice is now part of who I am, and that's an incredible thing. And I'm just so grateful.
Thank you. It's a great sacrifice for not just Canada, but Korea and peace and stability across the world. Tough time for Korea and a tough time for anybody that fought in that battle and the war.
I'd say to the veterans who fought here or anywhere in Korea, thank you. What you did, what you were able to accomplish. You protected freedom and democracy, in one of our allies, in a fellow democratic country. You did the hard business, and I have a lot of respect for that. And I hope that myself as a soldier and all the soldiers here in the contingent can carry on that legacy.
The Korean War and the Battle of Kapyong are over, but the memories of them remain here in Korea and in Kapyong. Many people say that remembering history is important. But why is that?
We need to learn from the lesson of the past. And one thing that's concerning me is my generation, the generation of my parents, and the generation of my children are lucky, we are all lucky enough to not have experienced at firsthand the horrors of war. But the danger with that is that because we have not experienced it, we may question or forgot those very, very important lessons that has been taught about never again. Let's not do war itself. And I think in the current context, it's even more important that our generation lead those important lessons. We need to find a way to not only pay tribute to those individuals, but pay tribute to the lesson that those wars have taught us. And that is something that is very important.
The story of the bond between Korea and Canada, forged through the Korean War and the Battle of Kapyong, is not over yet. And here is a photograph. In this photograph, taken after the Battle of Kapyong, a soldier is helping his wounded comrade. Who is he? And what hidden story does his life reveal? To be continued in the next episode.